Hello, and welcome to America at the Crossroad, where religion, faith, and politics collide. I'm Pastor Frankie Leggett III, your host. Our topic for today is: should Adventists criticize the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Should we be guilty of that? Here's why I asked the question. I saw a video recently where Mark Finley addressed the issue of supporting ministries that they love and embrace as opposed to independent ministries. Check out this video clip.
These lay organizations are committed to our message. They are cooperating in our mission. They have a passion to support the church. They are not critical of the church, as opposed to some independent ministries who think their major mission is to correct the church. That's not ASI. That's not OCI. That is not supporting ministries. They communicate clearly, and they also collaborate at times in projects.
One of Elder Finley's criticism of independent ministries is because he alleges they criticize the Adventist church. Now, I am not immediately disagreeing with him, but I do want to share this. There are two kinds of criticism, all right? There is destructive criticism, and then there is constructive criticism. Now, as a practicing Seventh-day Adventist Christian and as a practicing Seventh-day Adventist minister of the gospel, I do not endorse destructive criticism of our church. I do not condone that. And as far as I'm concerned, that's for haters, right? Those who've gotten mad at the church and left the church because their feelings were hurt for one reason or another. And then they throw stones at the church. That's destructive criticism. I never condone that. And if you are so upset with the church, I'm talking to the haters now, just leave and find a denomination of your choice. Or just leave and find no denomination at all. And don't ever set foot in another church ever again. That's your choice. But don't be dogging the church. So I'm never going to condone that behavior. But conversely, I absolutely believe that Seventh-day Adventists who love the church like I do have the right to offer constructive criticism of our church when we believe the church has made a misstep. And that goes for independent ministries or merely regular members. So, I'm going to raise my voice anytime I feel the church has made a wrong or a poor decision. Why? It's because I love my church. That's why. And it's what you do when you love something and you want it to be better and you know that it can be better. In fact, in Revelation chapter 3, verse 19, Christ said this: as many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous, therefore, and repent. Christ said, because I love you, I'm going to chastise you. I'm going to correct you. I'm not going to see you make a left turn in life and then just merely allow you to go down that wrong road and let you just mosey on into hell. I'm not going to do that because I love you. So I'm going to chastise you. I'm going to correct you. I'm going to confront you when I see you headed in the wrong direction. So why does God chastise us? It's simple. He died on the cross so that we might have everlasting life. And he demonstrated that he loves us. So here's another question. Why do we as parents reprimand, discipline, and chastise our own children? It's because we love them and we want them to be the best that they can be. And I guarantee you, even though I don't know this for a fact, but I guarantee you that Ted Wilson and Mark Finley chastised their own children and corrected them when they saw them doing something that they did not approve of, or they saw them doing something that they taught them not to do. I guarantee it. Therefore, it is no different with the Adventist church. When I am critical of my church, it's because I want my church to be the best that it can be. And I'm not being critical for the sake of being critical or mean-spirited or because I have a beef with my church, because I do not. Now, let me say this. I've been privileged to be a Seventh-day Adventist pastor for 42 years. I support this church with my time, with my actions, with my behavior, with my tithe, and my offerings. I've taught my children to do the same. I've educated all my children and my grandchildren in Adventist schools. I bleed Seventh-day Adventism. I've had heated arguments with members over the years who challenged the notion that the Adventist church is the storehouse and that our tithes should be returned to the church and not elsewhere. And I have no issue with members supporting their favorite supporting ministry or their favorite independent ministry. However, I am a firm believer that our tithes should be returned to the church, and whatever additional funds we have at our disposal should be used to support the ministries of our choice. I'm a third generation Seventh-day Adventist. I was educated in the Adventist educational system. This church changed my life, and I am forever indebted to it. I love my church. That notwithstanding, whenever the church does something that is not in harmony with Scripture or the spirit of prophecy or with Christian values, I am going to criticize it with all my might, not because I hate it, but because I love it. And it will not be destructive criticism. It will be constructive criticism. For example, and I hate to beat a dead horse here, but this horse must be beaten. And I'm talking about the overt racism that the Seventh-day Adventist Church practiced from our inception in 1863 into the 20th century. And in some instances in the 21st century. For example, in 1891, Elder C.M. Kinney, who was the very first African-American Seventh-day Adventist pastor to be ordained, he was sitting in the auditorium on the day that he was about to be ordained. And that auditorium obviously was probably a tent, and it was obviously during camp meeting. And so, while sitting with his family and his church family, who came there to support him on his ordination day, someone tapped him on the shoulder and informed him that he and all of his guests had to leave because they were not permitted to be in the same room with white folks. And he and his people had to get up and leave. We're talking about the Seventh-day Adventist Church. The church that in 1891 referred to itself as the remnant church, God's true church on earth. And yet we practice such foolishness. And for years, because the black work was growing, the leadership of the church created what's called the Office of Negro Affairs. And the first three leaders of the Office of Negro Affairs were white men until 1918, when the first black man took over. And because of that office, the Office of Negro Affairs had an office in the General Conference building. But for decades, starting in 1918, for decades, into the 60s, the leader of the Office of Negro Affairs was forbidden to eat in the cafeteria in the General Conference building. He had to brown bag it, and his office back then was down in the basement. He had to brown bag it in his office in the basement. How disgraceful is that of this church? And yet you want to refer to yourself as the remnant church, God's true church on earth. And you think I'm not going to criticize that foolish behavior? How about this? At Union College in Nebraska in the 1950s, when black students entered the cafeteria with their tray in their hands, they had to enter that cafeteria and they had to stand with tray in hand at the entrance of the cafeteria, and they had to wait for a white student to invite them to come join them. And if no white student invited them to come and sit down at the table and eat with the rest of them, that black student, that African American student, had to stand up and eat their meals. And I got this from Elder Robert Booker, who attended Union College in the 50s. So I got it firsthand. Now, to Union College's credit, I got to commend, I got to give credit where credit is due. Union College made a formal apology for that racist behavior, and I truly accept that apology. I do. Why? Because that's what Christians do when they're wrong. For me, that's Christianity. You recognize your mistakes and sins, and you address them, and you do the right thing. But the fact of the matter is, all Adventist institutions were segregated and racist. All of them. All of our colleges and universities were racist, especially Andrews University when I arrived there in June 1980. And I did not complete my PhD there because the dean of the seminary, who just happened to be born in Germany while Hitler was ruling, refused to allow me to matriculate there because of the color of my skin. It wasn't because of my grades. And it wasn't because of my GRE, which was over 1,000. And to be accepted, you had to have a minimum score of 1,000. My GRE exceeded that. And yet, he absolutely refused to accept me and then tried to even prevent me from turning in my application because he said I would not be accepted. Therefore, Frank, you need not apply. Just go somewhere else and apply to another school. My own seminary. I was devastated. I left there a broken man because I was rejected by my own church, by my own seminary. In fact, as late as 2017, the black students there at Andrews revolted and accused Andrews of being a racist institution. And it gained so much attention online that the school had to address it. So the president of the university, which was a woman at the time, she came on and she spoke, and other faculty members came on, but they had to, because the students embarrassed them. That was just 8 years ago. And Andrews University was still being accused of being racist. Just 8 years ago. And that was the norm for all of our institutions, colleges, universities, publishing houses, academies, elementary schools. GC, NAD, union conferences, all of them. In fact, at the spring meeting of the General Conference, the leaders of the black work at that meeting, spring of 1943, requested for integration. But President McElhaney, who was the president of the GC at the time, offered regional conferences instead. Because full integration was unacceptable for white Seventh-day Adventist Christians in the mid-1940s. And ultimately, in the spring, 1 year later, the spring of 1944, after Lucille Bayard, which I'm about to get to, that incident, then regional conferences were voted. And since I'm speaking of Lucille Bayard, let's continue the discussion about how racist the Adventist Church was, including all of its institutions. So Lucille Bayard, a light-skinned African-American woman, and her husband left Brooklyn, New York, where they were from, and they were visiting family members in D.C. when she took ill and was taken to the Washington Sanitarium, an Adventist-owned institution. Spring of 1944. The doctor began examining her when a receptionist came in the room and interrupted his examination to inform him that Lucille was not white, even though she could pass for white. The receptionist informed her that she was not white, and guess what the doctor did? He stopped the examination. He stopped examining her, and he moved her bed out into the hallway near the door, and it was cold. And her husband had to get a taxi to transport her to Freedmen's Hospital across town, which was on the campus of Howard University. And because of lost time, Lucille Bayard died needlessly when her death could have been avoided had not racism reared its ugly head yet again. Ladies and gentlemen, these are not made-up stories. These are historical facts about the racism that the Seventh-day Adventist Church practiced from the day it opens its doors in 1863. For a century or more. In fact, for more than a century. And so I keep railing on these issues because I want my church, unlike white America, I want my church to own up to its sins and do the right thing by my people. And what is the right thing, you ask? In terms of the United States of America, the United States should provide reparations for all African American families in the U.S. whose family origins hail from the U.S. Why? Consider this. About 20 years ago, Congress finally did the right thing with Japanese families and gave them reparations because during World War II, the United States government rounded up Japanese families and put them in internment camps during the war for 4 years. So, hold on. If the United States of America can find a way to pay all Japanese families for what? For 4 years of internment during the war? If they can do that for 4 years, how in the world can they not pay us for 400 years of slavery and racism and segregation? How in the world, how hypocritical? And likewise, with the Seventh-day Adventist Church, I just want my church to do the right thing. I want my church to own the fact that we were a racist organization and one of the last churches in all of Christendom to integrate and permit black and brown people to fully integrate into the life of the church, which is a historical fact, by the way. I just want my church to apologize to us and express their sorrow for their un-Christ-like behavior. And if and when the church does that, I will bury this hatchet. I will forgive and forget and move on, and it's quite possible that I'll never bring it up again, and certainly not in this fashion. But until that happens, I will continue to exercise my right to criticize my church, Mark Finley and Ted Wilson, until you decide to do the right thing. So, I have independent ministries. I have several of them. And I am not a destructive criticizer. And I love my church. And I support my church. And so when you speak, you need not lump all independent ministries and put them in the same box. You need to stop doing that. Because not all independent ministries are guilty of being destructive criticizers. You need to check your language. I'm just saying. I just want my church to do the right thing. And when you do the right thing, I will do the right thing. And until then, I'm going to call you on the carpet. Which is what I should do. Because I love my church. As always, I want to thank my producer extraordinaire, Lorraine Edwards, for the incredible job that she does. And if you appreciate the content that we put out on a weekly basis, I want to ask you to support the channel. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subs. So will you help me do that? So please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification button to get those videos each and every Monday morning. Until we meet again, be blessed. I'll see you then.